All right. Hello, bonjour, and welcome, everybody. My name is Milena Audino. I'm the Business Information Officer here at the World Trade Center, Winnipeg. I would like to begin today's webinar with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the lands of Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabeg, Innu, Denessilan, and Dakota Oye nations. We acknowledge that we are also in the homelands of the Red River Métis and that northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are on the ancestral lands of the Inuit. The World Trade Center Winnipeg team respects the treaties that were made on these territories and acknowledges the harms and mistakes of the past and present throughout our nation. So thank you everybody for joining our webinar, How Advertising Does Not Generate Revenue and Why You Still Need It to Grow, which will be presented by Drew Friesen of Drew Friesen Marketing. So just before we begin, I would like to outline a couple of housekeeping items. So number one, please send all of your webinar questions directly in the chat box. It should be on your top of your screen, and we'll try our best to answer as many questions. And then we're also going to have a Q&A session at the end. Number two, for all logistical questions, send them directly in the chat box, and I will try my best to answer as soon as possible. And lastly, you'll also receive a PDF copy and a recording of this presentation within the next week. So now it's time to start our webinar. I would like to introduce you to Drew Friesen. Drew Friesen is a fractional CMO focused on providing marketing leadership for businesses in the ag and manufacturing space. With a focus on data and customer insights, Drew works to build a marketing strategy aligned with your business goals and then partners with you to execute them, empowering and upskilling your team throughout the process. So the floor is all yours, Drew.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, we have a spicy topic today. I don't know if there's many other marketers that will say that advertising doesn't generate revenue. And so I think I have a hill to climb here to talk about. But I think at the end of this, that the topic will make sense. I think my goal here is to present a couple ideas based on what I've learned through my career, but also what marketing science and behavioral science or consumer behavior has taught us over the decades in research. And things haven't changed very much. And so we're going to observe where the science is taking us and what we need to learn about that and how that maybe impacts your business today. So without further ado, we're going to jump in. If there are any questions on anything, I'll be taking pauses and you guys can ask those and I'll try my best to explain it in different ways or facilitate whatever questions you may have. But yeah, it should all fit together by the end. So here's my hot take. Advertising does not generate revenue and why you still need it to grow. So as they said, I help businesses figure out why more of your market doesn't buy from you, and then I help you build a plan to solve it. That's what I do. There's more, fancy ways to say that, but that's how I like to talk about it. Today, we're going to focus on what really matters within marketing. So I ate some humble pie, I have to admit, in 2023, and it changed the way I see marketing. There's a lot of different opinions, which I'm sure that you've heard. From gurus in the marketing space that say you need to do this or avoid this or this is dead or everyone's doing this now and this is what's going to bring you success. But it's often contradictory and the advice really cancels each other out, right? They're saying opposites. And once I realized that in my own work, I said I had to get to the bottom of this and figure out what is really going on here. So I turned to the research and the science that existed in the space. Consumer research and behavioral science. This rabbit hole led me through to over 300 hours of reading peer or empirical peer-reviewed papers, essentially science and studies in the space, lots of talks with leading researchers, and many, many, many conversations with senior marketers ahead of me or experiencing different things that need to grapple with some of these problems. And today we're going to talk about what we actually know about how marketing works based on decades of science and math. Some sources that you guys will find after. Don't worry about it for today, but you'll get it in the PDF that goes out with the slides. So we're not going to talk about all of marketing, but I just want to say that marketing is a lot bigger than advertising. And while we're going to talk a lot about advertising and its effects today, because that's the topic, marketing's pretty big. And I like to talk about it like marketing with a capital M. Marketing with capital M is about the market. It's about the market that you're in, what they want, how it's broken up in meaningfully different ways. How you choose which parts of the market you're going to chase and which ones you're going to avoid. How you need to speak to them and position your company so that it speaks to what they need and what they resonate with, and maybe where they're frustrated and where you can serve them differently. And then that flows, all that insight flows into tactics, like how you price something and the offers you build, where you choose to serve or have your product available, what features you add or remove, or products you develop, and then obviously marketing comms. But that's advertising, that little slice at the bottom. It ends up being less than 10% of marketing with a capital M, sorry. As a note, I have written an extensive article on segmentation. I will not be talking about it today, but if anyone's curious about how you break up a market, I can provide a link for that as well. So, on to the topic at hand. Advertising is not a gumball machine. You cannot just put in your quarter and get your dollars. It does not generate sales. And actually, science tells us it's actually quite inefficient at generating sales. It's actually much more like a cost center. But that doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it wrong to do. And actually, it's quite important for business growth to advertise. And cost centers are all over your business. So is your warehouse, the gear, equipment that you need for your team, the software you integrate into your stack, the office buildings you need to house your employees. These are all cost centers. None of them generate revenue on their own or produce capital for your business, but they're necessary for your growth, right? You obviously need somewhere for your employees to work, and if you don't have a way to produce the goods, you can't manufacture anything. And if your team isn't safe, they're not going to be able to work very effectively, or they may run the risk of being injured. And so you need all of this for your business to run and to grow, but it doesn't directly generate revenue. You need them. You have them because they're necessary. They're necessary for your business. And advertising is much healthier to see advertising in that sense. So if advertising doesn't generate sales for your business, what is it good for? Now, just as a reminder, because I think we can get lost in business, this is how a market works. Customers bring demand to the table because they have needs. Vendors supply or bring supply to the table, and together that creates a market. Marketing is just the power cord that connects the two, right? You've probably used the term go to market. What's your go to market strategy, or what's your go to market plan, right? That's we're still in that world, though. I think it gets a little bit more confusing and distracting with all the different ways businesses can go to market today and the diversity of customers they tend to serve. But marketing in the end is just the power cord that connects the two. For today, we'll role play this. If you haven't convinced you yet, let's just break this down. I'm going to use the word lead, but I think that each business potentially uses the word lead very differently. So I'm going to define it today. And if you disagree with it, that's okay. But for today, I need us all to hold to this definition of lead, and whatever word you use in house, that's okay. But this is what we're going to call today for today's conversation. So we're going to define a lead as an individual with some level of declared buying intent for your product or service. So no, the list you downloaded of businesses or customers that could use your service are not leads. The people who download some PDF that you create that creates value for them or they find insightful is not a lead. A lead is someone who has declared some level of buying intent. Okay, I'm interested, or I'm curious, or I have questions because this might be a direction I want to head. That's a lead for today. So how do we get leads? Well, I think probably a more important question is, how do leads work? So I'm going to give you two scenarios here. Which one of these is more true? A buyer sees your ad, realizes they have a problem, need a solution, is convinced by your offer to act quickly and reaches out. Or a buyer sees your ad, is positively influenced by your offer, or maybe negatively. If they also happen to be in market, like they're ready to buy something and they need something solved, they engage with you, but ultimately go with an option that's most familiar, most available, and least risky for their own personal means. Science says it's this one. I think a lot in business, I think marketing is actually a huge criminal for this. We pretend that advertising can make someone want something, or we'll force them into market to open their wallet and throw money at you, right? But markets don't tend to behave that way. It's much more likely that people only buy when they're in market, and when they are in market, they ultimately, while they may communicate differently or behave differently, At the very end, they ultimately go with what's most familiar to them, most available to them, and least risky. And this happens in B2B and B2C. So before the questions, there might already be one in the chat. I can't see it right now. Before anyone says, is this relevant to B2B? Is this relevant to B2C? Or I'm a D2C brand or whatever acronym you want to use. Yes. Yeah. No, markets are static. It doesn't really matter. It's always people buying. And so these forces are at play. These are the laws of gravity of consumer behavior. You see, most businesses don't actually have a lead problem. It's much more accurate to say that not enough of their market knows them, not enough of their market considers them, not enough of their market prefers them as the ideal purchase for them, and not enough of their market can find them when they need a solution. Notice here, I'm writing this in a very specific way because this is, for those who have a marketing background or have heard of these concepts before in the past, this is the marketing funnel. But I think this is a very misrepresented funnel in today's modern era. The marketing funnel is not a linear or sequential process. People do not move through this like some treadmill or like your factory. People are in these each of these states at different times. They can walk backwards and they no longer consider a company to work with. People can forget about you, and over time, and I'll talk a little bit about this later. People can be not aware of you anymore. Maybe they were aware of you this year, but then you just fall out of their brain and they don't even consider you next time or not aware of you next time they have a need that your business could solve. And most importantly, your entire market is in here, whether they're in market or not, right? So even if someone bought something yesterday, right, they still fit somewhere in here. They're either aware of you or they're not. Of those aware of you, some would consider. Of those that consider you, some would prefer you. And everybody, whether they're in market or out of market, is somewhere within this funnel. So it's not tactical. It's not some landing page experience you can create through and some advertising sequence. It's not linear or sequential. People will jump forward or move backwards, and it doesn't assume buying intent. Just because someone, goes to your store, clicks on your website, views a video you created, does not assume buying intent. Right? These are not leads. These are just the people that make up your market. And you can probably, if I give you a grounded example, let's say, I want to try kombucha. Kombucha is an interesting niche beverage, kind of, I guess, as a beer replacement or as a health drink, depending on the company. We have some local ones here in Winnipeg. Prism and Wolseley Kombucha are two of the companies that produce kombucha here. Let's say, hey, I want to know what the fuss is all about. I want to try some kombucha. And maybe particularly I want to try Prisms today. This is just a hypothetical. So I go to my closest grocery store, notice availability. I'm going to what's closest to me as the buyer. And I go to the store and I walk down the aisle and I don't see Prism there, but maybe Wolseley Kombucha is there. So I say, all right, well, I still want to try kombucha and I buy it. Notice how the funnel comes to play here. I was aware of both. I was only really considering Prism and I preferred Prism. But what did I buy? I bought Wolseley because it wasn't available to me. And I'm not going to go to the next store to try to find Prism. It was just, what I preferred in the moment. But ultimately, availability is what served me the product and what won the sale. Now, I could be aware or consider or prefer any of these brands at any point, but it doesn't mean I'm buying kombucha left and right. I buy it very infrequently. It's not even it's not a daily, weekly, or monthly drink for me, right? So these are always at play. Consumers sit somewhere within here, and people will shift back and forth. So what's the point of this funnel? It sets your objectives. And I'm not going to talk about objective setting too much today, but I need to make the argument. So let's talk about a hypothetical here. How are we going to generate sales? Okay, let's all pretend we're marketers today. Even if this is not a role you have, that's okay. You, as part of the business, need to understand how this works. How are you going to generate sales? This is true. This is an actual report based on one of the clients that I worked with. With one of their segments, there was about 90 million households that was in this segment. About 6% of this segment were aware of them. 50% of the 6 would consider their product to buy. 80% of those would prefer them. And then of those that prefer them, 90% tend to purchase. Okay, so these numbers are of each other, if that makes sense, right? So 6% of the total 90 million, 50% of the 6, 80% of the 50, and then 90% of the 80 would ultimately purchase the brand. Okay, so I come to you. I'm the CEO in this case. How are we going to generate sales? I need you to get some sales, okay? You, sales and marketing department, go get some sales, right? We want to grow, or we're seeing a drop in sales. We need to go solve this. How are you going to go generate sales? cues the existential crisis for your sales and marketing department, because there actually is only one right answer. It's awareness in this case. And it's not always this case. This is commonly the problem that businesses face. But in this case, awareness drives the biggest impact, even if none of the other ratios change. And the other ratios don't tend to change. They tend to be very static, actually. So in this case, if you wanted to generate sales, your best course of action was to generate more awareness, putting up those billboards, attending that event, finding some way to reach, is the word we use in marketing, more of your potential buyers to improve your awareness within your category. This is a controversial take, but if you think about this right now, your sales tactics are not going to be what serves you ultimately the most sales in this instance. It's awareness. Okay, some of you still don't believe me. Nah, awareness and branding is marketing fluff. Can't we just persuade people to buy? Now, you probably wouldn't word it that way, but a lot of marketing and sales tends to be focused on convincing people, correct? Well, here's the problem. Solutions exist 100% of the time, problems do not. Advertising is simply not that persuasive. In behavioral science, advertising is considered a weak force of influence. And for current customers, people who have already either tried your product in the past or you worked with your business before, it is almost zero influence. Only a small portion of those in market today can be influenced beyond what they would have done anyway. Right? Now, you can imagine if we were selling, I don't know, shingles, right? For in Manitoba, there would be, you could say all of the houses, maybe we just do residential to keep it simple. All the houses need shingles, but not all houses are going to be redoing their shingles this year. And if they did their shingles last year, there's nothing you can say that will influence them to buy your shingles this year, right? Demand comes from the market, not the business. People don't buy when solutions exist. Solutions always exist. There's always a business that will serve them. They buy when they have a problem to solve. What got you to go out and buy cereal? An ad or an empty cereal box at home? What got you to visit the car dealership? A billboard or your total vehicle? Or one too many repairs is often what happens in Winnipeg, right, with our winters. What got your business to consider a new CRM? A cold email you received from some sales rep? Or you're continuing to have a customer data crisis as your business scales and gets more complex? If somebody has already bought a solution this month, nothing you could say will convince them to adopt yours. Okay. So let's say you would mostly agree with that. I got one more piece and then I'll pause for some questions. Then, the likely step we would take here is we need to pitch to those people who are in market. Because if most people are out of market, and we'll show you some of the numbers here in a second, then you need to find who's in market right now and try to persuade them, right? Well, let's do some math. How many of your buyers are in market right now? Let's figure out the total first. So we're going to make some assumptions so I can use some easy math, but every business is subject to a purchase or sales cycle, okay? That is basically how often that product is purchased, right? So if you continue using our shingles example, shingles aren't bought every year. They're maybe every 10 years, right? Depending on the kind of shingle you're getting. But for easy math, we're going to pretend this is a product that's bought every 5 years, okay? This is called a sales cycle. Once someone buys it, they don't need it again for another 5 years. You're selling, the kombucha example, it'll be a shorter purchase cycle. Or if it's, I don't know, a sandwich or something, it'll be a shorter purchase cycle. But there's always going to be an average purchase cycle no matter what category you're in. Not everyone buys at the same time, so we stagger out those purchases. That means for this 5-year purchase cycle in this market, only 20% of the total market will buy in over any given year. 5% will be in market to buy every quarter, and only 2% will be in market to buy any given month, adjusted for industry-specific variables, right? But such a small piece are buying right now. And of those, it actually gets worse. So we take this target segment. Again, this is real data, but anonymized. There's 44,000 households. There's a sales cycle of 15 to 20 years for this study, by the way. Contract value was about 20 grand. That means the market value, what's being bought each year, was 44 million. In a quarter, we just divide that till it is 11 million. In a month, again, just dividing again, is 3.68 million. And if they have a current market share of 20%, that means around 37 sales a month. Okay? Reaching the whole of your market really matters. on average, knowing that purchase cycles exist in every market, 95% of your ideal prospects aren't in market to buy. Only 5% is. Okay? Such a small sliver of your actual market is actually looking to buy right now. And most of them are going to pick someone they've already considered before they've entered the market. In B2B, a typical buyer will have completed nearly 70% of their buying journey before you know they're even in market. They haven't reached out to you. They haven't gone and talked to lots of vendors. They haven't put out an RFP or request for a proposal. They haven't done any of that stuff. It's all been internal meetings, but they've essentially solved and done the research and made a lot of their decisions. But 70% of that journey is done before they're even in market. This is from a 2024 buyers report across sectors. So being known before buyers enter the market really matters. Okay, I have a couple different studies here. Stick with me. So of this 5%, and I'll break it down to easy numbers in a second, but I want to show you how I get there because I need you to understand how real this number is across any sector in B2B. And this is almost exactly true in B2C as well. There's some very, very small single-digit changes. So of that 5%, remember 95% are not in market, 5% are. Of that 5%, close to 40% of them will end up not making a decision at all. They'll choose status quo. They're going to sit on their hands for a year. They're not going to go through that with that business expansion. They're not going to integrate that CRM. They're not going to go with a different trucking company. 80% of the ones have a vendor in mind before they do any research, okay? Which means 20% will go and find companies that can solve this problem. And then of the ones with vendors in mind, 80 to 90% will ultimately choose from their day one list. Okay, I'm going to use different language here to make that sound more plain because I used a lot of percentages here. But the day one list for most companies consists of 1 to 2 brands. Okay, if you're not in that 1 to 2 brands, you're not likely getting the sale. The day one list, that means before any research is done for any business, is around 1 to 2 brands that they'll really think about. And they ultimately go with one of those 2 brands 90% of the time. And this is, I've cross-referenced 3-4 large studies using large data sets across multiple sectors, B2C, B2B. This tends to play out every single time within a varying degree. The cost of not being considered day one is really high. People buy what they know, what they're familiar with, what seems less risky, what is very available to them. Only 6 or 5% of the 5% are going to pick outside their day one consideration set. So if all you're doing is trying to chase people who are showing that they're in market or are doing tactics that are around the buy now attitude, you're only even what's even available to you is 5% of the 5% in market. And obviously, they're still only going to go with what's available. One client that I worked with was an international B2C company. While they thought they were losing to competitors because their regions weren't big enough where their dealerships were, when we did the research, what was actually happening was while they looked like they had lots of dealer coverage across the States and Canada, what that actually was happening when I talked to the consumers was their dealers were too far apart. And so even though they had the better product at the better price and that they were well known relative to the competitor, buyers were choosing what was close to them, who would pick up the phone, who they could drive to and go see the product, and they would ultimately choose that one, even if there was other, quote unquote, better solutions on the market. Okay, I'm going to pause here. It's a lot of information. Are there any questions up until this point that I could answer? Take a pause, and then we'll keep going. Making sense so far?
Yes, there's none in the chat, but anybody can also feel free to remove their mics and ask any questions.
Sorry, I'll give it 60 seconds. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at people here, and then we'll jump in. I'm also happy at the end if we have some time, like we can look through some examples based on your businesses as well. I think that'd be fun. Jennifer, I see your hand.
Yeah, I've got a question, Drew. Is this more true for certain types of industries or certain types of sales, or is it pretty much the same across the board?
It's pretty much the same across the board, and I'm going to show you why in a second. I mean, the simple answer here, there's nuances, obviously, to what I'm saying, and it will be slightly different depending on the category you're in, what competitors exist, what alternatives look like for the market there. But the simple answer is, if people are not aware of you, there's no chance for them to consider you, and there's no chance for them to prefer you, right? And so awareness tends to be the dominating force as to why something is bought. It doesn't mean you can go solve it through advertising necessarily, because there's other things that impact whether someone's aware of your brand or not. But yeah, no, predominantly people don't spend a lot of time looking for the perfect solution. And the cheaper or less risky something is, the more this is actually in place. It's just a much more around, they're going to go with what we call a satisfice option, right? I don't want the best kombucha. I need a kombucha. That's good enough, right? As per my original example. And the B2B sake, while there's a large buying community, it's much more about risk mitigation. So if I'm buying a $500,000 or a multi-million-dollar project, whether it's a building expansion or a new CRM or some software or API, whatever, while, they may do more research, ultimately they're going to go with what's the least risky, not get them fired, essentially, whoever is making the buying decision. And so that still tends to go with who they're most aware of, who they're most familiar with, who they've worked with in the past, or a business next to them has worked with in the past. And so it plays out essentially identically. While the variables are different, it tends to play out almost identical across both B2C and B2B markets, depending on costs. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? That was a good one. All right, we'll keep moving. And if you have a question, just throw it in the chat and we'll get there. Okay. So yeah, people buy what they know, and there's so few people you can budge. Again, like I'm saying, there's 5% of the 5% or 5-6%, depending on the market, are even going to go outside of that day one consideration set. And so if you are not early, if you're not proactive to this, the market will play out as it does. And there's just very few sales for you really to win, right? And there's some of those, by the way, when we're looking at this tiny slice, you can't even see the orange slice, right? The 6% or the 5%, 6% or the 5%, it's there. It's just, you can't even see it, so small. Some of that larger green slice, they are choosing you, right? But they're not choosing you because of anything you're doing today. They were ultimately going to choose you regardless of your efforts, right? They've already made up your mind. You were in their consideration set. And depending on the size of your business and where you are in terms of market share, there will be a lot of people who you are in their consideration set. But there's not much you can do to influence that. You've already made their consideration set, and they're going to choose you regardless, right? Again, this is something that why would a marketer say this to you, right? But I want to give you guys essentially how the markets kind of play out in the most candid way I can tell you. Okay, so for advertising to be effective, for the majority of the things that you're trying to, again, there could be different goals for advertising, but let's not beat around the bush here. For most advertising goals that you could set, to be effective, you must fight for awareness. You need to maximize your reach, the number of unique, different people that would be in your addressable market that see it, right? There's a limited amount of demand in market at any given time, and you don't know who's in market. And even if you could know, most of them have made up their mind. Whether they articulate it or not, behaviorally, they will go with what's familiar and what's available. Limiting your focus only to people who are ready to buy and have their wallets out already risks you spending money on buyers who have already made up their mind or would have purchased your solution anyway. Okay, so I can hear your brain saying to me, so do I need to invest in brand advertising, as people talk about, right? And wait 6 to 12 months to see if I got things right? No. And this is actually one of the big myths that I hear a lot. I know there are some marketers in the chat here, some that work for in-house, some that are agencies. This is a slight call out, I realize, but it's a myth that exists in the space that people will tell you that brand advertising, this awareness game that I'm trying to talk to you guys about the importance of it here, takes time. And that, at the 6 to 12 month mark, we can look back and say whether it was success or not. That's not actually true. There's more nuance to that. It's important for you to understand the nuance. Actually, most of advertising works immediately, but the full impact is realized over a longer time horizon. Today's revenue is a combination of baseline sales that you would have accomplished anyway, and then marketing that you've done, putting yourself into the market through all the ways that I talked about at the beginning over multiple quarters. So if let's pretend for a minute, I'm going to make sense of this line graph for you in a second. We're this orange line, okay? And we're going to launch this campaign, or this campaign to some new buyers. So we launch it and we see some success. And the CEO comes to us and say, "Great job, team. The marketers really won the day for us here. Everyone else, good job, but thank you, rockstar marketers, for all your work here." But notice this isn't within a vacuum. All the things that you did last quarter and the quarter before that and the quarter before that are still playing into today's numbers. Marketing starts off with, let's say 100% of its effectiveness starts in the beginning, and then it diminishes over time. And quite literally, this happens on a biological level as people literally forget the things that you've gone out to say, right? Marketing doesn't happen in some, I don't know, nebulous space. We're talking directly to people, and we're hoping that it sticks in their brains, the message that we're trying to say, so that ultimately, when they enter the market, they recall what we said, and they reach out to us first to see if we can solve their problem. So about 50% of the effectiveness of that ad or that campaign that you ran happens immediately, the impact. And then in some decaying fashion, about 40% happens here, 30%, 20%, and 10%. It kind of happens over time. But to measure the impact of this campaign, you should know immediately if you've hit the note. You're resonating with buyers. You're starting to see some new sales come in. And then it diminishes over time as your campaign gets forgotten. This is also why when I work with clients, I tend to say that you should have a consistent spend in advertising. Unless you're doing something very sophisticated, which, for being honest, most of us are not, there is a lot of value to a consistent spend all year, all the time, always. Because you don't know when people will enter the market, and all of that spend has a lasting effect over multiple quarters in the future, right? And advertising today, I've observed and I've seen reports and external data suggesting that it can last, 2+ years after. But the important thing is the immediate impact, the largest impact it will have will be immediate. Okay.
Sorry, Drew, not to interrupt, but there was one question in the chat. So somebody's asking how to retain your existing clients, any ad.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so somebody's asking how to retain your existing clients, any ad.
Okay, well that's a whole nother topic. The short answer is have an incredible product and focus on new buyers. The long answer is also kind of short. Loyalty does not exist in consumer behavior. I'll repeat that again. Loyalty does not exist in consumer behavior. It does not come up. It does not exist. What looks like loyalty is much more like familiarity and risk mitigation. I went with it last time. It didn't suck. I bought these expensive shoes. I loved the feel of them. I don't want to risk again an unfamiliar company with a different shoe for that same big scary price tag. And so I'm going to go with what I know. And you see this play out everywhere. People buy stuff that isn't the perfect solution, but it's good enough. Or ideally, they've done it before and it didn't suck, and they don't feel guilty or buyer's remorse about the purchase, or it didn't get them fired in a B2B environment. Loyalty does not really exist. And when we're talking the bigger the business it is, people are more loyal, with quotations, to them just because they're big and they're familiar and they're available. And there's something to bigness that lowers the risk as well. I worked with a company with a better product. Again, this is in a different category. They were serving businesses as big as Disney, down to mom and pop manufacturing shops, and they didn't get chosen for some of the biggest deals, not because of how great their product was or their service team or whatever, just because they were smaller. And that big business, where risk tolerance was almost everything, said, "Price be damned, features be damned. I just need to know that if something breaks down, it's going to work." And the bigger company, it's much more likely that they're gonna fly out and save us, right?
Mhm.
When something goes wrong. So loyalty doesn't really exist. And if you're talking about retaining your current customers, other than having a fantastic product and doing the best you can at meeting their needs, the next best thing to do is spend all of your efforts acquiring new customers. Because really, at the end of the day, the market chooses when it churns, when it stops being your customer.
Mhm.
You're not in control of it.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So advertising happens over a long period of time. the impact should be felt immediately within 4 weeks or so of you launching something. If you're not seeing a difference in what you would normally see, your baseline, you're not seeing a difference, something's not working. Do not wait 6 months. Act immediately. So the real purpose of advertising, to recap, is that most advertising works by reminding people about brands they know when they need a product. And if people are not aware of you, I'll add to this quote, your job is to introduce yourself. And introductions are much harder than reinforcing familiarity about a brand they already know. It's why big companies have the unfair advantage. But that is the role of advertising. If people are not aware of you, they'll never consider you and they'll never ultimately purchase from you. And so your job is to introduce yourself to as many new buyers as you can manage. So let's talk a little bit more grounded about brand awareness, because it isn't just advertising. And actually, advertising is only a very small piece of it. There's a reason why big companies stay big and get bigger and small companies struggle to get to the same size with explosive growth, is that I'm going to get a little theory based here, so just bear with me. Your share of market, your market share, heavily influences your brand awareness. And that makes sense, right? The more customers you have, the more people that are aware of you, quite literally, right? So while only this number one here is one that we can control within advertising, word of mouth is a form of advertising, is a form of your brand awareness, and that only exists if people have already bought your product, right? Exposure via the purchase process, maybe when they were about going to purchase something, you were on the sidelines. Maybe they didn't purchase you, but now they have some level of awareness. Incidental exposure, like driving by one of your work sites if you're a construction company, or seeing you on the shelf if you're retail, or prior direct product usage. Obviously, if they're a past customer, right? They have awareness of your brand. But these are very grounded in the rest of business, right? Brand awareness is not isolated to just advertising. All of these things drive brand awareness. But your brand awareness, all of these factors, all 5, are directly tied to your current market share, right? I'm not telling you here to go spend big on advertising and focus on awareness, because I know if you're small, there's only so much you can spend, right? And so all of these are tied to your current market share, which is why growth isn't a hack. This is why you shouldn't believe companies that tell you that you can just explode if you just advertise a little bit, because the amount you can spend on advertising is going to be tied to what you currently sell and the margins you have to leave room for investing. And the bigger your company, the more word of mouth, the more exposure, the more incidental exposure through driving by or seeing you on a shelf, and the more people that will have tried your product in the past and so are familiar of the brand and would give it a chance again. So all of these are constrained by your current market share, which is why it's not as sexy as people say. Growth is slow but reliable and steady when you continue to push where you can. And while, like I said, you have no control over the 4, you must advertise and communicate as much as you can to new buyers, because that's one of the only ways to improve your brand awareness and increase dramatically the likelihood that someone would choose you. But this is why market share is so stable. This is why people grow a certain percentage each year. And most of the explosive growth that you hear or see are because the entire category is exploding in growth from external factors that are nothing to do with marketing or advertising, right? COVID had certain sectors explode in popularity and other ones completely die, right? In today's trade war that we're seeing across Canada and the States, some things, this is creating dramatic increases in business for local business, and in some, it's completely killing businesses, right? A lot of those are larger factors to market share growth than any of the top 5 here. Market share is relatively stable. The best way to build a brand then is by creating a great product and getting it in as many hands as possible. That's good branding. So to recap, advertising has 2 nuanced but distinct goals. Your goal is to become quick to mind, that when someone enters the market, before they do any research, that you're one of the brands they think about. And if you can increase the amount of people that's true, you will grow as a business. And the second is to be easy to find. I think this used to be in classical marketing be called physical availability. But in today's integrated world, you need to be digitally available too. When they search you on Google, can they find you? When they look on maps, can they see you? When they go to their platforms where they do research or talk to people and try to figure out what they're going to do and ultimately choose to purchase, are you there, right? Be easy to find. But ultimately, these are the 2 nuanced goals. Notice here how this fits the long and short of marketing. Long is to become quick to mind and target out-of-market buyers, which is, by the way, the vast majority of people you could talk to. Anyone you talk to, you need to assume they're out of market, because statistically, 95% or more are not in market to buy anything. and to be easy to find. Short. These are people who are in market and quickly need to find a solution. If you're on more shelves, so to speak, you will see more sales. So, in conclusion, this is the last slide I have for you here, is marketing does not generate revenue. It's a non-linear multiplier of sales, right? It does not produce revenue. It's not a gumball machine. It doesn't do its own thing isolated to your business. Your business, your products are what create sales because that's the value the market wants. Marketing is the fuel to the fire. It's a non-linear multiplier, and it does that by increasing recall for new buyers across your categories. So when they enter the market, they think of you. And for you to do that to as much of your market as you can manage. And by increasing your availability, both physically and digitally, so that you're on as many shelves, so to speak, as possible, that you can target as many buyers as you can manage. This runs counter to the way most businesses and most agencies measure their marketing efforts. So my little teaser to have us thinking, but I don't have time for it to talk about it today, is then how do you know if your marketing is effective, right? If these are the two ways that marketing can actually, or advertising can actually be effective, how do you know if you're doing that today? Okay. That's us. I don't want to kill it here, though. Oh, I'll leave this open. Presenting. If there's questions, I'd love to talk. I'm okay. Also, if we even go over, we can role play some examples. If you have some questions or challenges to some of the things I just said, I know it may seem clear here, but this probably runs contrary to the way your business currently thinks about marketing. It's the way your business currently chooses to create objectives for your advertising. So grapple with this, really think about it, and see how it would actually impact your business and the way that you interact with the market. So I'm opening the floor to questions here.
There is a question in the chat box, so I'll just read it out to you. So somebody said, imagine if the Wikipedia was in very early stage today, so nobody would know about the website concept, and with only a few content available for users. Do you have any extra valuable advice for this crazy online startup, but with very limited budget? So how to advertise / market wisely?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have two thoughts here. I think, and I'm not saying that you're necessarily thinking this way. I think, but there's a lot of businesses that fall prey to the market doesn't know it needs this yet. If I just show them they need it, that will solve their problems. You know, we're not therapists in business. You know, people have a problem. They know what it is. You know, in my shingle example, maybe I've had a shingle that's been dead on my roof for a while. I know that's there. I haven't pulled the trigger because maybe one shingle is not enough of a pain point, or I haven't had, you know, a very simple solution come across my path, but I know it's there. It's called latent demand. It's existed for a long time. But you coming up with some radical solution isn't what's going to convince me that, oh my gosh, I never knew I needed that. That's not really a thing the way markets behave. People buy something because they have needs. There's a framework called the job to be done framework, and everyone's got a job they're trying to get done, whether you're buying groceries at the grocery store or picking some complicated technology for your business. Everyone's got a job that they're trying to get done, and they're going to pick the solution that can get the job done and all the outcomes that exist within it, right? And so for your startup, I would try to think about what needs do people have, maybe where are they unmet needs, where are the current alternatives in front of them and the solutions they could choose. Maybe they're frustrating. Maybe the process is frustrating. Maybe they're not as good as it could be. And you've found certain areas where you can improve on the way that they currently solve that problem. I would communicate that. I would find the people that have unmet needs and try to reach as many of them as possible. I think that you need to focus on, again, like I said, maximizing the amount of people you can get in front of and then communicate and build something that actually has unmet needs. People always, when I bring this idea up, people always point to Steve Good, the like founder of Apple, right? The smartphone. And they say, well, you know, he always talked about, you know, people didn't know they need the smartphone until they built it in front of them. But that's how he talks on stage. When you look at talk to his other or watch his other interviews when he talks about this, they did tons of market research to understand the problems people had, the frustrations they had. And while they never thought about the solution being a smartphone, all of it was very specific needs that people were having or problems they were experiencing. And a smartphone just tended to solve a lot of them. And so, yeah, I guess my suggestion to you would be, I don't know the technology that you're working on here, but I would say ground it in what the market is actually asking for, and you'll be much more likely to succeed. Understand where they're frustrated by the current ways to solve the problem and how maybe you can solve it better than their current ways of solving it. and then just maximize how many people you can get in front of and communicate that, not some jargon they won't understand. Resonate with the unmet need.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The next question, somebody is asking, if your company is small and provides a unique product, what is the best medium to get your name out there to the most viewers?
Well, okay, I'm going to be a jerk first. The most viewers, I mean, go on YouTube and spend a lot of money. YouTube has over 2 billion concurrent viewers or unique viewers monthly. It is a staggering amount of the global populace on YouTube. So that's my short answer. My long answer is, I don't know what platform you should be on. You need to understand who your customers are and where they are. Where do they spend their time? Where can you get in front of them? I think it's less about which social media platform is the best. In general, organic social media has been in a death spiral of it's becoming less and less effective over time because these companies that run them, like Meta for Facebook and Instagram, or TikTok and Douyin in China, they need to turn a profit. And the only way to do that is to monetize these platforms and allow advertisers to come in to spend money to get in front of their audiences. So, I mean, there aren't any, golden tickets to get in front of your audience. The best way to get in front of your audience is to get creative and find ways to get in front of them. The second best way is spend some money to guarantee it. But like I was saying before, excuse me, on that one slide, there's a reason why, don't believe the gurus about the perfect fit. I'll go back to that slide here if I'm still sharing. I think I am.
Yes.
Yeah. So, your market share is tied to all these factors. You don't have budget. I know. I'm assuming you don't have budget, and so you need to spend what budget you can manage. You just set to spend, and maximize the amount of the right people you can get in front of. So I would just do the research. Where are your people? Where can you reliably get in front of them? Actually have them view it, which is why I love traditional media. Things like billboards and stuff are much better for a quality view, or what we call in marketing an impression, than social media. Social media, depending on the placement, can be really poor. People don't actually see your ad. It disappears before they even registers in their brain. Find out the best way to get in front of your people. Do your research, find out where they are, and then go big based on your budget. Pick one thing and go big instead of throwing a couple cents at a couple different platforms to see what will work. It's the opposite of a recommendation you probably get from other people, but that's what I tend to see works. Hopefully that helps. I know I can't give you a solution unless I know what your audience is, so I can only talk. Yeah, do what you can. Yeah, it's not very sexy, is it? Yeah, I'm really trying to spell it out as plain as I can. The market will move as it is. You're not going to just explode in market share from nowhere. I mean, you only really have two ways: you get creative, or you spend lots of money, right? And ultimately, the companies that do both will win the most. So yeah, I mean, if you don't have a lot of resources in front of you, spend what you can and get super creative and listen to your market. I think that the biggest competitive advantage you can have is someone who's a business that's market centric, that understands their market at play, which is why I do what I do. I think it's so important to understand the market. I spend most of my time obsessing on the market, not the business. The business knows who they are and they can talk really proudly about that. I'm much more interested in what the market wants and how it acts and why it's different from, different parts are different from each other. And if you understand that, you'll have a competitive advantage and you'll beat companies that are spending more than you. Yeah, no, that's a good question though. Any other questions?
Yes, there's one more. So somebody's asking, or I guess they're saying, I work for Glitch Secure, a small Winnipeg-based cybersecurity service provider. We are focused on SaaS-based businesses for our ICP. We know our niche that we can offer those unmet needs. I'm wondering if you would run one consistent message and awareness ads, or would you do additional messages, spending less on each ad?
Yeah, okay. I mean, the way these platforms work today, you can actually run any amount of messages you want for the same budget and it will optimize for it as long as you're setting proper objectives. So if you want to test messaging, that's a different conversation entirely. And I would pick a couple strong messages and just see how they perform. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important that, like you said, so you're working in SaaS, so that's software as a service for those that don't know that acronym. Based on their ICP, which again, that acronym stands for Ideal Customer Profile. I'm just going to just translate this message for those that don't speak this language. And so that's what they're targeting. That is their segment. First thing I would say is be careful with your assumptions. I would try to look at the market overall before you needlessly segment towards SaaS. I'm not saying that you haven't done this. I'm being difficult because that's my job. But don't niche just because it's what people tell you to do. Niching is a means to an end. Niching is not how you grow. Niching is actually reducing the amount of people you put yourself in front of, right? So niching is actually a force against you. But companies niche because you have to, because it's a necessity, because you don't have the resources to reach everybody or serve everybody, or your software is not competitive to certain segments, or it's not what they need. So the first thing I would say, because it's my job to poke here, is be careful niching, and don't do it carelessly. If you have a great product that you think would serve a lot of people, I would try to figure out what's the biggest group of people you can serve with your product instead of automatically niching yourself. And then, like you're doing there, which is good, I think that, highlight what those unmet needs are and communicate those. But yeah, no, like you're alluding there, if you're saying, one message versus lots, you can definitely try some variations and test them. If you're talking about splitting it into lots of pots, I'll revert back to my original recommendation: is go big, go big. Go big or go home. Splitting into small pots is the market forces against you. You actually, I know it runs contrary to how you would think about it, but you actually want to go really big as you can based on your budget, which may still be small, but that's okay. But you do your research and you go big to maximize your chance of sales. And by big, I'm talking about the best platform, medium, channel that makes the most sense for you, and then you do it all year instead of one spike. I'd be really careful about one spike. Again, one spike, it has a decaying effect, because if most people won't be in market, and then after you did your big thing, for those that didn't purchase, they're slowly decaying over time. It's a lot like a chemical compound. They slowly forget, right, the messaging that you have. And some people will remember, but the number will reduce over time, right? And that's a pretty linear curve. I know I'm getting sciencey here, but I want to make sure that I'm providing, the laws of gravity, so to speak, as marketing works. That's a good question, though. Other questions?
That's all that's in the chat, but if people want to unmute themselves, they can also feel
Yeah,
free
you
to
guys
do
can
so.
ask it. Just come on mute, or come off of mute. Sorry, if you want to ask it as well verbally. That's good too. I'm good to sit on here for a couple more minutes. I got time. People have to go. We'll send this recording, as we had said
Yes.
before. So
Mm-hmm.
no problem. But I think this is a juicy topic, and if people have more questions, I'm happy to talk more on it. Yeah, no problem, Ashley. Jennifer, yep, I see your hand.
Does creating better awareness kind of shortcut the time it takes to build a good book of business? Does it provide a shortcut, or is it the only way that it can be done?
Well, again, if we're thinking about awareness as just advertising, your business may grow without any advertising, because growing brand awareness is a holistic business thing that happens, right? It's an effect of word of mouth, exposure via someone looking on the market, right? If you're just on the shelf, you could do no advertising but be on the shelf, which, by the way, is what paid search is. I would not even call Google paid search advertising in a sense. It's much closer to that, like, flyer when you go down the breakfast aisle and there's like that punch out, that's what paid search is. It's the aisle. It will not get someone to walk down the aisle. They will walk down the aisle whether they do it or not, and they will see then your flyer. Ultimately, if they weren't familiar with you ahead of time, and if they have a consideration set, they're not choosing you. But some will, right? You'll get a percentage that do, which is why people learn maybe the wrong lessons from doing this. They're like, oh, this is the best way to grow sales, when it tends to be quite inefficient. But yeah, no, it gets you on the shelf. So yeah, get on the shelf. But no, awareness is not a shortcut. Awareness is the only way. Like I was saying before, like, if people are not aware of you, they will never consider you. But doing advertising is not the only way. It just tends to be a force you need to go reconcile, right? The fact that, I'll say this in a different way without marketing jargon, you need to reconcile as a business that if people do not know you exist, they will never have the opportunity to choose you. Doesn't matter if your product is great, or that you really care, or that you put your customers first, as everyone says on their ads, right? That does not matter. It is irrelevant if they do not know who you are. And so you need to go figure out how to solve that problem, right? And so you can let word of mouth grow, which, by the way, does not grow. It's a regression. Word of mouth slowly dies off, because only a very few will talk about it if they're super ecstatic or super negative. By the way, it works in the reverse too. But the vast majority will not. So it's a regression curve. Exposure via the purchase process. I mean, if you're on the shelf, that's great. That's how a lot of businesses grow in the beginning, depending on products, is they just are on the shelf. They get in more stores, and thus they see more purchases, or they get on paid search and they're on more digital shelves, so to speak. Incidental exposure, because maybe you have a very physical product and they drive by. It's like, hey, look, these guys are building this building, or they did this, or they did this countertop, and that's incidental exposure. By the way, that requires you to have sold lots of things, right? For that, for that to exist. And then prior use, if there was a past customer, right? But that's the only forces. That's it. And so you need to decide what you're going to do to grow awareness. And if you don't actively do that, yeah, I mean, it is not scalable. It's not scalable without those factors. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you could see it as a shortcut. Depends on how you want to visualize this. But these are the forces you must reconcile. And it's okay. I've seen businesses grow without advertising, but usually they mix it up with, they do events and stuff. Well, that's advertising too, right? Or they're post on organic social media and they build a bit of a community. That's advertising too. That's why I put advertising and comms together. You need a way to get in front of new people. And some are more effective than others, but ultimately it's the same force you need to battle. And it decays over time. This is not something that once you've earned it, it's there. I just did this research for a client. They're a somewhat large construction and general contractor in Manitoba. I just did this, and they thought they had awareness with a bunch of these companies, but their awareness was much lower once we did the analysis because it had decayed over time. They haven't seen them, haven't done a project with them in a while. It's been a couple of years since they've done some larger investments, and it has decayed. They were much lower than they thought they would be on awareness. We had some work to do. It was close to essentially their current market share, which is how it always is. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, but it's not a shortcut. I mean, this is your only route. You can choose how to solve it, but this is essentially the forces you must fight against. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, I think I see one here in the chat. I have it now open, so I can read it here. How do I meet business people, startups, small or medium businesses in Winnipeg for making connections and sharing information, and sometimes pains, maybe in an informal way? I mean, WTC Talks. I'll plug you guys. These guys do a great job of bringing in a host of experts, people who have been maybe ahead of you in their business journey or in the same spot as you. There's networking events that they run that aren't sales pitches. They just rub shoulders with other people that are just having a go and doing their best. And I think if you go to these events and don't pitch yourself, but instead ask the questions you're asking there, like, where do you find information? What are you dealing with? What are you frustrated with? I think that you could do a lot of informal research, which is what I'm gleaning from your question here, at networking events. Just don't pitch yourself, build relationships, try to understand the market. I think it'll ultimately serve you more than doing your one pitch to someone who statistically is nowhere near the market, right? Based on the math that we looked at previously. So yeah, no, go to good events in the city. Anybody else?
Yeah, there is one more question. I don't know if you're able to see the chat box, but somebody's asking if marketing doesn't directly produce revenue, how do you justify the spend, especially when budgets are tight and sales are down?
And if marketing only increases a chance of sale, why invest in it over channels that drive measurable conversions? Okay, I'm going to be bad cop today because it's more fun. And I think it's more important to be really clear about this. There are no channels that measurably drive conversions in the way that you might be experiencing it. The measurement tools in these platforms obscure the way markets work. What I'm talking to you is channel agnostic. It does not care about the channel that you're in. It does not care about whether you're doing retargeting or conversion-based objectives. It doesn't care if you're doing a billboard or a radio ad. It doesn't care if you're doing no advertising or doing this like, guerrilla marketing, community-based. These laws exist regardless of what you want, regardless of what you do. And I think where people get trapped is when they run, let's say, a retargeting campaign. And for those that don't know what those are, basically you can set a campaign that like, if they visit our website or if they click this or if they watch this of our stuff, we can run ads to them, right? Well, when you run those and then you look in your marketing dashboard on those platforms, it will look really good. It'll look like that's where you get most of your sales. It'll look like that's where your cheapest cost to acquire customers are. It's going to look like it's going to be the most engagement and clicks and website traffic, et cetera, okay? It's a trap because by definition, you've filtered people who have already built awareness of you. They've watched your ad, they visited your website, they have some level of consideration with you already. And so really what you're doing is you're showing more ads to someone who is already there. You've already built some level of awareness and consideration. Now, you can have incremental results from retargeting. Don't get me wrong. You can tell more of the story. You can articulate more of the reason to work with you and how you can help solve unmet needs that they may be experiencing and why it's a better option for you. But it is not as incremental as people think it is. It is not some money-making hack. Retargeting tends to be the least efficient form of campaigning you could run. And I stand by it. And I can show you test over test that I've done with past client work, that retargeting is not as good as it looks. It is over-promising. A lot of people who are you're retargeting were going to purchase you regardless of what you do anyway, and you're just spending more money on that conversion, to put it bluntly. If marketing only increases the chance of a sale, which, by the way, everything you do does, nothing is certain. Why invest it over other channels is because, again, the force is at play here. You must build awareness of people, because if they don't know you exist, they won't choose you. But like another way of doing that is like cold calling people, right? Again, I don't, let's not isolate different marketing things in a vacuum, right? You can grow awareness of what you do and who you serve anyway. And, you have your sales team probably cold calling people or cold emailing people. And that creates some level of awareness, though it tries to get them to buy something. And statistically, people aren't in market. It's not very scalable. It can burn some bridges. There's some pros and cons to doing this, right? But all of these things grow awareness, and you'll see some level of success from them. Again, I would have to bring up, but this is a whole other topic or workshop, is we could take a look at measurement, and everything that you do within marketing with capital M should be measured above baseline sales. Okay. You should be able to build, doesn't matter how small you are, a baseline of what you project to see in sales next month, next quarter, for the full year. And everything you do on top of that, in terms of the activities you go and invest in, or channels you choose to spend money on, things that you do, should be measuring above baseline sales. When you see gurus or sales or marketing leaders say, we generated X amount of sales for this business, be careful believing that, because they're probably not measuring it versus baseline sales. Most of the promotions people see where you give a discount to get people to buy aren't as attractive as they look, right? When you run a discount, you're taking only away from your own margin. All other variable costs stay the same. And a lot of the people that were going to purchase you with that promotion that you ran, we're going to choose you anyway. Yes, you will get, to be clear, people that were not going to choose you, that are very price sensitive and chose you because you were the best price in the market. But mostly what you're doing is you're just shortening their sales cycle. They were going to purchase from you maybe next month, maybe next quarter. And because you reduced your price so dramatically, they moved into market earlier. The demand was already there. You did not create it, but you changed when they entered market slightly because of a harsh price drop. But mostly you're hurting yourself. They were going to purchase from you regardless. You're stealing from your future quarters. And there are very few price promotions that actually effectively improve profit margin of the business, which is your lifeblood. So yeah, marketing does not directly produce revenue. Nothing does but your product. Not even your sales team, actually. If I was going to be really blunt, your sales team also doesn't produce revenue. The only thing that produces revenue is the exchange of services for monetary value, right? Either your house cleaning service, it's the cleaning of the house. If you're selling a pair of shoes, it's the exchange of shoes for monetary a transaction or whatever, right? So nothing produces revenue within your business, but all of it is necessary to facilitate the revenue. Raw assets also sit in your business, not producing revenue, right? If you have raw assets to produce your goods, they also don't do anything for you, as well as finished goods. I see lots of businesses that have finished products just sitting in warehouses in their business. Those also aren't making you any money. Only the transaction with the market actually produces revenue for your business. So yeah, no, just playing over the definitions here. It's absolutely pivotal to improve awareness, and you can do it in a myriad of ways. And for lots of businesses that are very sales centric, they just build a gigantic sales team and cold call everybody. And while it is somewhat successful, it's not very effective or efficient to do so. Eventually, you need to do both and have a marketing department that's improving your awareness consistently and as effectively, as efficiently as possible, and then having a sales team to serve when inquiries come in and to serve as quickly and as helpful as possible. Hopefully that answers your question. But I'm going to be really blunt about that, because we got to be really careful how we see these. We've been sold a lie, mostly from the platforms. Again, not from the agencies that use them, but the platforms themselves are very misleading on how to measure this stuff. But that's a different topic for a different day. Any follow-up questions, Jeremy, or somebody else that wants to add to that? And by the way, I'm not trying to poke at anybody specifically. I just want to make sure that we really understand maybe how these things function. No, you can't guarantee sales. I know businesses want to control the process, but you have no control. The market has control. Ultimately, all you can do is build the best product possible based on what the market wants, and then be everywhere so it's available, and have more people than currently do think of you. And if you do that, you will grow. And actually, just improving awareness, I'll stand by this, you'll grow. It's actually certain. And there's actually math equations you can run. It's called excess share of voice. You can just improve awareness. Because in a sense, if your business is already, I don't know, let's say 2% of the total market in Manitoba, you've already validated the product, right? It already sells. It may not be the best product, but for some people, they'll still choose you. So you can just improve awareness and you will grow. Straight up. You invest in awareness, you'll grow. How efficient the growth will be based on how you executed that awareness and how good your product is. Really. So that's the math equation there. But no, like if you're asking, is it really, if it's so uncertain, it's like, well, everything is. But if you just grow awareness simply and you leave everything else the same, it's almost guaranteed that you will grow. It just may not be as efficient as you want it to be. No, the market's full of people and people are not reliable, but large groups of people tend to follow very specific trends. Okay.
Yes, I think that's it for the questions. If anybody, yeah, I think that's it. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. This was a very insightful presentation, so thank you so much, Drew, for also joining us. I've included just a few links on our last event for June, and stay tuned for more webinars and events that are coming up in the fall. You could sign up for our events newsletter as well to just stay updated, but have a great rest of your day, and thank you guys again so much.